Hey everyone, I'm Caitlin. Can everyone hear me? Okay. All right, so tonight's guest speaker, who you just saw, is Ralph Risch, a biologist who specializes in Florida scrub jays and who currently works at the Seminole State Forest. He received his bachelor's degree in environmental science from the State University of New York, then continued on with his education at the University of South Florida, where he was a part of the zoology master's program. Risch has had a passion for birds since he was a child and has studied or worked with them since then. During tonight's program, he will be covering the basic behavioral biology of the Florida scrub jay and how their population is being managed at the Seminole State Forest. Please welcome Ralph Risch.
Okay, can you operate the
You want me to do the slideshow?
yeah, do the slideshow and I'll listen, because I got a laser pointer.
Okay. If you could try to stay in this general area though, since we are on Zoom.
Well, we're on Zoom.
Yeah, we are on
Oh.
Zoom, so we're a little limited.
All right, I'll send this down area.
You want the mic?
Yeah, sure. Is this good?
Yes, that should be
Am I still
good.
Zoom now? All right. Yeah, I'll take them down. We'll just read this direction. All right. So the first thing is, usually what I do before I do one of my talks is I go through the entire slideshow and practice. Unfortunately, this time I wasn't able to do that because we got two big assignments this week on Seminole State Forest. The tree nursery over near Withlacoochee, where they plant all the trees that they're going to be, the seeds that they're going to be planting as trees in a couple of years. Some of them going to private individuals who buy them, some going to state forests who plant them for restoration purposes. Yes? No? Okay. I thought you were saying, you're wrong. I'm so used to that. Well, every couple of years, they can't get enough bald cypress and pond cypress seeds because trees, like everything else, have their cycles. In this particular cycle, it is a down year for both bald cypress and pond cypress seeds. So they asked us if we could get some for them. I'm like, well, maybe I think we can. On Seminole State Forest, we have the national champion pond cypress tree, the 360 point tree. The points are assigned based upon the circumference of the tree at the breast height and the height of the tree and the 1/4 of the average crown spread. And it's a very impressive tree. So I went out there and said, well, I found some pond cypress cones on the ground. So for on Monday, the day that I was supposed to be going into the office to practice this, we were out there picking up pond cypress cones for all morning. And then today I had to go out and do timber inventory. So I haven't practiced this. So I might get it completely wrong, but that's okay. You won't know. Okay. Yes. So, this is my assistant. I haven't trained her, so. Seminole State Forest scrub jay, where they've been and where they're going. So I'm going to cover a bit of their biology, and I'm going to see how we've been managing on Seminole State Forest, and where we're hopefully going to be going from there. Now, this is the Florida scrub jay. This is the typical pattern. There's several species of scrub jay in the West. They used to all be considered the same species, scrub jay, but the splitters got hold of them and started splitting them out like they do with plants. You know, I think you have one Coreopsis. Next year you got 4. You used to have Opuntia humifusa in Florida. That was the Eastern prickly pear cactus. Now it's like 4 different ones. Humifusa is even in Florida. Now it's Opuntia, Ostrina, the big common one. Right. So the splitters got hold of the scrub jay thing, but they were right. And so the Florida scrub jay was split off from the Western species, and another scrub jay species was split off from them. That was the island scrub jay of Santa Cruz Island in California. And then in 2011, they said, well, these other ones are kind of different too. So now there's like 4 or 5 different scrub jay species. And the one that distinguishes it physically looking, when you look at the color from the Western scrub jays, the Florida scrub jay has a white forehead, not just white eyebrows, but an entirely white forehead. And their voice is different, their behavior is different, they're a little bit different in color. And of course, they're 1,300 miles away from the nearest other scrub jay species. So you're not going to confuse them. And this guy, I'll just tell you the color. This is silver, yellow, and purple. That means this bird was banded in 2007. And the area he was banded in was an area called Fisherman's Road population. And he was a first-year bird. So this bird was born in 2007 and probably born in late 2007. Okay, next slide, please. All right, and that's of course me. And this bird, this individual was an unbanded bird that came onto the forest about 7 years ago, just showed up in one of our areas and completely unaware of what a human being was or peanuts were or anything. He cussed me out no end. But after about the third time out there visiting her, I need to train them up to peanuts so I can catch them so I can band them. My banding setup is in the back. Check that out before you leave. She started thinking, well, you know, I could get those peanuts straight from the guy. I don't have to wait till he throws them. You know, these little wheels were turning in her head. And so she kept flying at me. So I said, well, let's see if she'll become hand tamed. I held it out. Just like that, she was a hand tamed bird. And so as you can see, she's sitting there on my arm, waiting for me to give her a peanut. She's an awesome. And this is the pattern I use for birds that I don't know their provenance. A silver, which is the aluminum band with a unique number on it, provided by the Bird Banding Laboratory in Kentucky, Maryland, over a colored band, and then a blue band on the upper left leg. A blue band on the upper left leg means the bird was banded in Seminole State Forest. Regionally, everybody knows that. If my birds end up somewhere, well, they're not mine. I think of them as mine. If they end up at some other conservation area and someone sees them, they call me and say, hey, Ralph, we've got one of your birds. They'll know because of that band. And then this band. This is the pattern I use, silver color dash blue color for birds that I don't know where they came from. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, the Florida scrub jay basics at LSJ. Florida scrub jay, Aphelocoma corulescens, is Florida's only endemic species, can be found nowhere else in the wild. So it's the only bird species that can be found only in Florida. You know, I think maybe that would make it a good candidate for the state bird, just saying. But others don't see it that way, but we'll see. What are you doing? Oh my God. You can't get it off. Anyway, so it's split off from the other Western scrub jay species probably, somewhere about 1 million years ago. About 800,000 years ago, Florida was nothing but a series of islands along the Central Coast because the sea level was much higher then, and most of peninsular Florida was underwater. And so that's like Whale Ridges, this long ridge of sandy dunes. Prior to that, there had been one ancestral scrub jay species that spread across a great swath of oak woodland that went from Georgia all the way across the south in Texas, all the way to the West Coast. When that finally broke up, by that time, the Florida scrub jay was isolated on these islands that were Central Florida and evolved there, and that's how it became different. And there's been one record, hypothetical record. It's not really very clear whether there's a good record in Georgia, but we're going to ignore that one. So it's basically the only bird in Florida that is entirely only found in Florida. It's a member of the family Corvidae with 131 other species, give or take. Thank you, splitters and clumpers, which includes magpies, magpie jays, tree pies, ground jays, rooks, jackdaws, shows, nutcrackers, and roes and ravens. So they're all pretty much the same, except for the ground jays and the tree pies. They're kind of weird, but the rest, they're just big jays. It's Cirrus genus Aphelocoma with 6 other species, all in the western U.S. and or Mexico. California scrub jay, island scrub jay, woodhouse scrub jay, Mexican jay, transvolcanic jay, and unicolor jay. Due to its shrinking population and distribution, it is listed as threatened by both Florida and federal. I think it probably ought to become listed as endangered because the population is still dropping in much of its range, but I don't get to make these decisions. However, I do put my 2 cents with them. Next slide, please. Good job.
Catching on.
Got to give them positive reinforcement. Today's Florida population was estimated at 100,000 circa 1920. 1992, Archibald Biological Station in South Florida. Excuse me. Archibald Biological in South Florida did a thorough survey of the state, and they came up with around 10,000, and there's as few as 6,000 today. That was an estimate, 8,000 done in 2011, also by Raoul Bolton of Archibald Biological Station. He's not there anymore. He's doing other stuff, but it was a good count. So you see the pattern here. That's a 90% drop in 72 years. That's not a good sign. Most of this is because of habitat loss. Florida scrub jays like Florida scrub, which is these ancient sand dunes, sometimes recent sand dunes, the ones on the coast that are covered with oaks. Well, there's other uses for that humans have found. One is citrus, and one is cattle, and another one is McMansions. And so it all ends up being cleared for these things, and then you don't have the scrub jays or any of the other endemic species. And you have a big field full of bahia grass. Woohoo! Okay, next slide, please. Seminole State Forest basics. The purchase properties for Seminole State Forest began in 1990. First tracks over 6,000 acres acquired between SR 44, that's State Route 44 and 46 in Lake County. Land acquisitions have continued, so Seminole State Forest now consists of about 28,000 acres. It's actually now up to 30,000. Just right about a little bit over 30,000 acres right now. Of these 30,000 acres, over 6,000 acres are scrubs, scrubby flatwoods, a former pasture, recovering back into scrub. Areas of scrub that contain Florida scrub jays heritage can easily be accessed by the public, which we will do on the 13th if you come along. Okay, next slide, please. So putting the two together, Florida scrub jays on, since we get Florida scrub jays on Seminole State Forest were estimated at approximately 50 birds in 1990, an estimate of 18 territories. That's again, Raoul Bolton did that in 2011. By June 2008, there were 113 Florida scrub jays there on 50 territories. June 2013, 95 adult birds in 39 territories, and currently there are about 86 birds. Well, we're a little bit above that right now. We're down, now we're about 96 birds. So we're fluctuating around the mean there. Next slide, please. And here's the pattern. So you can see that when back in 2007, that's the number we had, and then it dropped and slowly and then started going up. Right about here, 2015, 2016, was when we did a treatment on a lot of our habitat. We treated over 900 acres that year. They were either chopped and burned, or logged and burned, plus a few that were just, there were wildfires in them. And so you can see scrub jays start going up a little bit. The problem is they've had really bad nesting success lately, which has nothing to do with anything we're doing. Most likely it's associated with climate change. That's my best guess. But the nesting success just has been what it should be in good quality scrub. And we have plenty of good quality scrub right now. Next slide, please. So they were known to be on Seminole State Forest, but their population was in dire shape. Most scrub was suboptimal. Something had to be done. Suboptimal means it was too tall. Scrub jays like scrub that is approximately 2 meters to 3 meters tall, that has a bunch of gaps in between each individual oak, and that doesn't have a lot of sandpine. The reason is because sandpine grows twice as fast as the oaks. So a scrub jay occupies the scrub for reproductive purposes on year 3 to year 4 after a fire or other treatment, because that's when it gets to the point where both it's structurally good for them to nest in the oaks. They're functionally, the structure is right for them, and it produces acorns. And acorns are really important for Florida scrub jays because that is their winter food supply. Each individual Florida scrub jay has to cache 6,000 to 9,000 acorns each year in the autumn, individually in spots in the ground, and recover 2,000 to 3,000 of those to survive the winter. Okay, that is their big winter food supply because, hey, it's cold, everything else dies or is hiding. So they really don't have a whole lot of choice but to eat those acorns. So if you have years where you have poor acorn mass, they have a hard year. Also, if you have scrub that is not yet producing acorns, they can't occupy because there's no acorns there to eat. So it takes till about year 4. And then by about year 10, it's too tall for them and too dense. So they have about 6 years worth of effort to reproduce successfully so that pass on their genes to the next generation. And each Florida scrub jay pair only has to produce 2 kids to grow up to also be adults and breed to have a stable population, right? So they have that long to make this a success. So you have the 6 years to do this on average. The average lifespan of a Florida scrub jay is, any guesses? Exactly. What a coincidence. Isn't that amazing what ecology does? It works perfectly. All right, so anyway, so treatments began late 1990, started with logging, then burning, sometimes chopping. 2001, there were 3 OPS part-time biologists were hired to monitor them and ban them. 3 dwindled down to 1 in 2005 as the grant money ran out. They banned and monitoring began in 2001 sporadically. They banned 103 scrub jays between 2001 and 2005. Regional banning scheme was worked out. That's why we have a blue band on the upper left leg of some of the Seminole birds, and excuse me, state land with Florida scrub jays in May 2005, and there we have it. Next slide, please. May 12, 2006, Ralph starts working for Seminole State Forest as a biologist to OPS. Next slide, please. Well, that was the important part of this whole thing. Okay, this is what Ralph found. 76 Florida scrub jays observed south of State Route 44 on Seminole State Forest 2005. Only 31 could be found by June 2006. All right. We had some hurricanes, other things going on. Well, that was not a good sign. But I kept searching. 12 retained the original bands, 12 had lost 1 or more bands, and 7 were abandoned. Just so you know, no bird that you ban should be losing bands if you do it right. This was part of the problem. The guys they hired came up with a scheme of how to put these bands on, but they didn't bench test it. They didn't test it in a lab, sitting in the office to see if those bands were tight. And so these bands they were putting on weren't staying on. So I had to reband a bunch of these birds and recapture. Okay, by November 2006, another 14 Florida scrub jays had been found south of State Route 44. So, you know, we're pushing 50 here. An additional 89 were found north of State Route 44 that nobody knew anything about. So 134 birds in 43 territories, only 30 were already abandoned. So I had my work cut out for me. Roughly 1,500 acres of scrub on Seminole State Forest was found to be in Florida scrub jay optimal or better condition. So this is about right for that number of birds. Next slide, please. This is what we decided to do. Intensive banding was begun in early 2007. 420 Florida scrub jays have been banned on Seminole State Forest since March 2007. Over 100 of those in the first year, because I had to ban all of those 134 birds we have in the forest. I had to ban over 100 of them in the first year, so we got close to having all of them banned. That was a lot of banning. A census Florida scrub jays counts and territories would be concluded once every 6 weeks, which it has been since then, with a few exceptions. Occasionally, my boss says, "Ralph, we need you doing something else. You can't do your census this time." This has happened 3 times. One of those times, well, I think it was a good reason. The other times were not, but that's not the point. I don't make these decisions. I just get paid for them. Nest searching and monitoring of Florida scrub jay nests would be done on a sample of territories, roughly 33% each breeding season. It's much lower than that now. It's maybe 20%. Last year it was almost none because they had me doing other stuff. Data would be collected on scrub structure and change vis-a-vis Florida scrub jay occupation, use, and reproductive success, which we did. And I've got all the data on it, but I haven't got around to publishing yet. But someday, I promise, I'll publish. Scrub properties adjacent to some state forest would be pros for purchase with more frequency and vigor, which I have frequently and vigorously pushed for. And sometimes it has worked because most of the properties that we have acquired since that 28,000 number happened, most of the 2,000 acres have scrub on them because we've been pushing it and pushing it and pushing it. And so that's why we're getting more scrub. And we are currently in the works to get another 130 some odd acres sometime this year of scrub, which already has scrub days on it, by the way. Next slide, please. And most importantly, scrub treatments and retreatments would be proposed, chosen, and their completion accelerated. When I got here, they'd done a bunch of treatments. What they hadn't done is plan to retreat those areas they treated. You can't do that. It has to be every 10 years on average, because if you don't, you lose the birds. And you can't do it all at once, because if you do all of it at once, then they have nothing, no acorns, right? So you got to do it in patches. There wasn't any planning for that. So that's the next thing we did, is we started planning, getting the patches that we needed treated in a pattern that would retain the birds in the areas where we already have them. There would always be scrub that was in condition for the scrub jays talking about. Next slide, please. 2011, the plan was designed to focus treatments on 3 core areas, all with 750 acres or more, and within 2 miles of smaller but still substantial scrub areas, 200 to 400 acres. This was all estimated with a computer program that estimated the long-term survival rate of scrub jay populations based upon how much scrub was available. And Wolfenden, Fitzpatrick Wolfenden and Copenny in 1991 found that this was how much was needed to do that. All right. Essentially, if you have 750 acres of contiguous scrub in condition or more, 400 years is when we would expect the population to wing out on its own without other populations nearby. So that means we have 400 years. I have 400 years to do what I got to do. All right. I'll see you all there at the end. So that's what we're doing. We're trying to make sure that we're not going to waste our time focusing on treating these small little patches. They'll get treated when we do other stuff or when it's convenient. But we're going to focus on getting the big patches treated and always treated. So continuously going on so that we have enough populations on the forest that we never have to worry about Seminole State Forest population going extinct. So we have 3 of these we're focusing on. All are over 750 acres. If each one lasts 400 years, well, each one can support the other one. So now it goes up, not 400 years, but the math on that would put it up to about 10,000 years. Okay, as long as you have all 3 of them and they all can disperse with each other. Now, this all depends, of course, then on climate change not throwing its wrench in the gears, which it has. So all bets are off at the moment, but we're doing the best we can. All right, so we got a grant for $49,800 in 2013 from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, chopped 450 to 800 acres of scrub in the core areas nearby supporting areas. After some logging in 2014, 756 acres were chopped in 2015 on Lacaluke, Sulphur Island, and Sand Road Wakaiba scrubs. So this is a story of things looking like they're screwed up, but actually working out to your benefit, because that is how the world apparently works. So I had this plan in 2012 to get this grant. We got the grant, and it was all set for 2014 when we were supposed to do it. But my boss talked to his boss, and his boss decided he didn't want us to chop all this scrub. He wanted us to log it. And so he was telling us we couldn't do it. We could do 100 acres. And I'm like, no, we've got this grant. So, and they delayed and they put off and everything. And I'm just getting really frustrated because it wasn't meeting the timeline we needed to retain the birds. On the other hand, the delay ended up putting the grant in timing for when we put out the bid for the project to the contractors, right at the time when the gas prices were really low in early 2015. Remember back then it went down to $1.89 a gallon? Remember that? Oh, good old days. Yeah. All right. Well, that's the biggest expense for people who are doing shopping is fuel. And so if the fuel prices are up, they're going to bid higher. They're going to say, you're going to have to pay us $100 an acre, $120 an acre to do this. Well, we put the bid out right as the fuel prices were at the lowest point. So we got a bid for $64 an acre. We had based our estimate on $90 an acre. So the result is instead of doing 450 acres of scrub, we got to do 750. So it looked like it was bad luck, but it turned out to be good luck. All right. Next slide, please. These are Florida scrub day core areas. This is Seminole State Forest. When you come into the forest on the 13th, if you're going to be out there, this is where you were going to start out. And you can see all of this purple here. This is all areas where we have scrub that is enough scrub for the Florida scrub days to use. Not always in condition, but it's always there. And so these are the core areas. I'm going to move over this way a little bit. I'll be back to you soon. Don't go anywhere. So, for example, this area up here is the Lake Tracy area. And we've got over 750 acres of scrub there. We have 400 some acres here on Maggie Jones Road. This, we have over 1,000 acres. This is the Laco Loop Open area. Sulphur Island has 850 acres of scrub. We've got another 300 or so down here. So you can see is if we have all of these have scrub days in them, they're all close enough that they can disperse between the areas, and they do. I have birds that have dispersed from right there all the way down to right there, same place we're going to be on the 13th, and have had breeding success down. And then I've had birds that have dispersed from right here all the way up to here, Ocala National Forest, and are breeding up there. So they do the dispersal so they can be mutual supporting populations to keep themselves perpetuating long term. Next slide, please. Let's look at the results. Next slide, please. How did you know it's just like, okay. Maggie Jones Road area. One territory with 4 birds in August 2006, dwindling to 1 individual bird by March 2009. So 1 male there all by himself, lonely. And I was all sad because there were no plans to do anything with the area. I'm like, Joe, can we do something with that? He says, well, it's just not on the docket right now. We have other stuff to do. And it's fair, he did have other stuff to do. But I'm like, 1 bird, come on, man. Fortunately, there are morons who live in Royal Trails. And one of those morons in the middle of a red flag, you know what red flag is? Everyone knows red flag. You can't burn anything. Conditions are so dry and it's so wet and it's so hot out that if you even look at a match, the whole forest will go up. So people are banned from burning anything. You can't do pile burns, you can't burn leaves in your yard, you can't do barrel burns, not even supposed to smoke cigarettes, right? As we all know, people are morons. There was one moron who lived in Royal Trails and said, hey, no one else is burning, I guess I'll burn. So he does a burn in his backyard and he says, I don't think I need to sit here and watch this. I'm going to go inside and watch Jeopardy, which he did. The fire didn't care. The fire said, wah, and jumped out, burned down his shed and started this wildfire. It was from west to east. So in the Red Oak wildfire on 5/1/2007, burned 285 acres of scrub, 210 acres of which was on Seminole State Forest. All right. Again, remember what I said about things that look like disasters working to your favor in the long term? This is only guaranteed to be true if you see an opportunity in it and you jump on top of that opportunity. So that's what I did, and that's what Joe did. So it burns scrub on Seminole State Forest with salvage logs. Joe, let's get a salvage logging in here. It'll squish down more of the scrub, and let's glom on some of the other sand pine scrub nearby in the sale. It's like, oh, okay. So 136 acres of scrub was logged of its sand pine during the sale. Additional 16 acres of unburned scrub and adjacent private land was logged. So there was a landowner who burned through his property, and I called him up. I found his name, called him up, and said, "Look, do you want to make some revenue off of your property? You better do it now." He's like, "Well, you think I should?" I said, "Well, that lumber is not going to be marketed forever. It's been burned. You're not going to get a great price for it. It's better than nothing." All right, so he does it. So there we are. We have another 16 acres of habitat available for the scrub days in a few years. Total scrub thus treated was 437 acres. Next slide, please. Chopping, burning, logging results. Late spring 2009, Florida scrub day property boasted 4 birds in one territory due to immigration. 3 birds from Sulphur Island, which is again south of 44, so they dispersed 6 miles north. 3 birds from Sulphur Island, 5.6 miles to the southeast. October 2012, Florida scrub day property grows to 21 adults. So 2009, 2012 is how many years? 3 years. Population goes from 1 bird to 21. Just like that. Okay. March 2014 population of 23 adults and 2 juvies, Florida scrub days in 10 territories, and as of June 2018, we had 20 Florida scrub days in the territorial cluster and 7 territories. Next slide, please. So this is cool. I love doing this. So in 2009, there's that poor one little guy. He's sitting right there. He's like, oh, it's so long. Nobody loves me. This is my territory. Okay, next slide, please. Okay. And then some dispersers came up from Sulphur Island. And so we had 2 territories there, him here and this one here. I'm just going to point out this purple area was the area that was burned on the Seminole State Forest in the Red Oak wildfire. The wildfire started right about here. This addition area was logged. This addition area was burned. This addition area was burned was on private. This area is burned on private property, and this is private property that was burned. This area was logged. This blue was logged in 2007 privately. And this is the additional area in Seminole State Forest that was logged, that wasn't burned, that added on to increase the amount of habitat. So watch that as it changes, because when you see these territories popping up, you're going to be like, ooh, that was a good idea, Ralph. All right, next slide, please. Okay, there's 2010. I got 3 territories. Next slide, please. That one went away, but there's one over there in the area that was logged that wasn't burned. Next slide, please. 2 more territories. 2012. Next slide, please. Now look at it, they're all over the place. 2013, keep going, next slide. 2014, next slide, please. 2015, this one goes away. 2016, comes back, another territory moves in there. Next slide, please. 2017, and now you're starting to dwindle. So you're seeing you're getting this pattern. The scrub is getting taller. So now all this nesting success is not going to be so successful because the fire was in 2007. Now now it's 2018, so it's been 11 years. So the scrub is just not in as good condition. But this area here was treated. This area here has been retreated. That one has been retreated. And now we retreated these 2 areas as well. And this area down here has been retreated. So we're expecting the population now will begin to increase again. Next slide, please. And there it is in 2018. And one more time, next slide. So this shows, this is not all these territories active at once, but this shows where territories did show up during that time, just like that. So if you do the treatment and you've got birds in the area, they will come and they will reproduce. But that's not the most interesting thing. Next slide. This is the most interesting thing. Okay. This is the number of territories. This is the red. And the green is the number of birds. You can see the pattern. I mean, this is classic. If this continued down this way, this would be a classic normal curve. Statistically, guys who've done statistics, you know that. It's absolutely classic. Next slide, please. This is the really cool part. This is the total number of fledglings, and this is adult birds that are. Let me see if I can move a little better here. Yeah. The red is the local born birds. So the population is birds that were born locally in the Maggie Jones area. So the red ones were born in Maggie Jones. The blue ones are immigrants. But as you can see, the immigrant population goes up. Slowly, the native-born population goes up. Then the immigrants start disappearing and starts getting taken over by the resident-born birds. That's the good thing. That means they're starting to become self-supporting. And if you keep the treatments up over time, if you have enough area, they will continue to show that pattern. Okay, next slide, please. This is hatching of 5 eggs from the nest on Maggie Jones 1202. This is how I do my territories. MJ stands for the general area, which is Maggie Jones Road. 12 is the year, so that was 2012, and this is an arbitrary number 02 for the territory when I first found it. And that will stay the same forever and ever. That particular area, if Jays show up there in the future, it'll have that 02 suffix. They fledged on 5/26/2012. See the little guy there? He's the top of the egg is on his head like a little helmet. You have to come out of that. So these other 4, they're going to hatch later. I'll just point this out too. This is the basket of their nest. It's about 4 inches across. And they line it with these fibers. These fibers are from Seminole palmetto, Seminole State. And it is the only thing scrub jays use to line their nest. Florida scrub jays use to line their nest is the fibers of Seminole State and the cabbage palm. But they'll sometimes use cabbage palms or sable palms that grow around the ponds because it produces the same type of fiber, but they're not super common out there. So pretty much all of it's going to be from the scrub palmetto. Next slide, please. Laco Oka area, 2006-2018. One Florida scrub jay territory with one mated pair of birds in August 2006. These dispersed about 2 miles southwest to Sulphur Island in October 2006. Of the roughly 1,100 acres of scrub and scrubby flatwoods in the Oka area, 945 acres were logged of their sandpine in August to October 2008. So we logged as much of it as we could of the sandpine. As I said, sandpine goes twice as fast as the oak, so we want to eliminate it because that means the scrub jays can stay there and breed longer and more successfully. About 200 acres of log area were burned in August 2010. When they burned that, I was sitting at home in DeLand, about 15 miles to the east, because I got off early. So I'm sitting at home in my yard under the tree, and all of a sudden I feel something land on my arm. I look down, and there's a piece of palmetto ash that had landed because the smoke was blowing from west to east, and it had brought down right on my arm a piece of palmetto from the area that I was involved in getting treated. It was very surreal. All right, anyway, about 320 acres were logged and chopped and burned in August 2011 and 2012. I know this is a lot of numbers, but the point is it adds up. About 200 acres were logged, and all that were chopped and burned August 2015, spring 2006, along with 130 acres, so 350 acres total. Next slide, please. A territory of exploratory Florida scrub jay showed up in September 2012. So 2008 was when the first logging happened, and then 2010 was when the burning happened. So 2 years after that, an exploratory family showed up, just showed up there and looked around and then changed their mind. The first permanent jays showed up in April 2013. So 2010, 11, 12, 13. So almost 4 years later, right on time for the acorn crop to start, giving them something to eat for winter. Translocations of Florida scrub jay families, 4 families of 9 birds, from Ocala National Forest took place in January, February 2017, and again in the same time frame in 2018. By April 2018, there are 9 territories with 25 birds. Next slide, please. So here it is. This whole area in blue, here and down here, this is the area that was logged. This area was burned. This area was where the territory, one territory that was really there. So this area was burned at the time. This area was later burned. This area was later burned. This area was later burned. This was in 2010 that this was burned, and these ones in yellow were burned in 2011 and 2012. Next slide, please. And so this territory had gone defunct. It's only gone to Sulphur Island, but in 2013, this is the first territory that showed up. Next slide. 2014, more territories. You know this pattern here? They're next to each other. Scrub jays like neighbors. They move next to each other because they're mutually supportive. They function as neighborhoods, these territories. Now, imagine you, who here is a homeowner? Has a home, they live in it, right? Who has neighbors? Who loves their neighbors all the time? Yeah, who sometimes likes their neighbors? Right, exactly. It's the same thing with scrub jays, because the neighbors can be pains in the ass, because you go over there and their branches hanging over your yard and they're dropping fruit all over your yard. You want to mow your yard and say, man, could you trim those branches on your tree? It's like, no, they're over your yard, you trim them. You're like, well, I don't want to trim them, they're your tree. It's like, well, too bad. You're like, well, come on, man. And so you're grumble, grumble, grumble. But let's say that the next night his house catches on fire and he's asleep and he doesn't know it. You're going to let him burn up? You're going to go wake him up. You're going to go wake him up, right? Okay, it depends on the neighbor. Okay, to be fair. But in general, you'd go and wake him up and you'd help him fight the fire and put it out. And you'd console him and give him some free fruit that fell into your yard. Well, scrub jays are kind of like this too. They fight with each other over the territorial boundaries and they push them back and forth. But if someone sees a predator, Suddenly they're all in there mobbing that predator together, and territory boundaries don't matter at all. The other thing that happens is Florida scrub jays have this behavior called sentinel duty. So they will have a bird sitting up on an oak looking out for predators, particularly Cooper's hawks. And if they see one, they'll give a really sharp call like that, and everyone dives into the bushes so they don't get eaten by the Cooper's hawk. Well, this is great if you have one bird or two birds, but let's say you just have two birds in a territory. The other half of, when somebody has to be on sentinel duty at all times, what's the maximum number of time you as an individual scrub jay, if half the time you're doing sentinel duty, you can spend foraging for food? Come on, simple math, folks. Half, 50%, right? Well, let's say you have 3 birds in the territory, and somebody has to be on sentinel duty at all times. Well, now how much time do you have? Right, 2/3, 66% of your time, 67%, whatever, somewhere in that range. And let's say you have 4 birds in the territory. Now, how much time do you have spending foraging for food? Okay. You're getting a lot more food in your belly, aren't you? So this is why scrub jays have an advantage in that they are cooperative breeders. So they have helpers in the territory. Not all of them, but on average, they have 1 helper per territory, so 3 birds per territory. So this aids them that they can do this and get more food by having this helper in the territory. Helper is usually an offspring from an earlier year. And he'll help with raising the kids and things too. But then the other advantage is, you see these 3 territories here together. Let's say just one territory, you have 1 bird on sentinel duty. He has a certain percentage likelihood of seeing that hawk come, doesn't he? What do you think the percentage is if you have 2 birds on sentinel duty? It doubles. And if you have 3 birds on sentinel duty, now the chance of seeing that hawk coming has tripled. Now you have 3 chances. Well, if the hawk is down, there it is. The hawk is down here. Come on, laser. There. So the hawk is here, and this guy calls. These guys are close enough to hear it. So it's advantageous to have neighbors because they're going to have kids on sentinel duty too, who are going to see those hawks coming maybe, and increase your chances of surviving because they're looking for the hawk too. You have 3 sets of eyes. So that's why this is a typical pattern. If you have 1 territory scrub jays, you might get 1 down here, 1 over here, but mostly they're going to crowd together because it's to their advantage if they can do that. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so then now we have these 3 territories, and 2 more have shown up in 2015. Next slide, please. This one's disappeared, but this one has shown up. Next slide, please. Oh, 2 more down here in the Oka area. This area was treated in 2012, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. So a year late, but they're there. 2 territories down there, plus more up here. Next slide, please. 2018, another territory down here, another one over here. Okay, I got to be fair here. These are translocated birds. So we carried them in from Ocala, so it's kind of cheating. But, you know, they're ours now, so too bad. Next slide, please. And so this is showing all the territories that had been there at any time during that time. And these little flames show where we've done treatments. All right, so this is again, you fix the territory and the birds show up. Birds are now occupying this area this year, which we did a recent treatment. We did it back in 2016. So the birds are occupying here now. They're occupying down here. They're occupying up here, and they're occupying over here. All the areas that we treated in 2016. The next slide, please. So this is regenerating sandpine. Sandpine grows to height about twice as fast as the oaks. So if you have a scrub jay and he has 6 years to reproduce in good scrub habitat, but the sandpine is growing twice as fast, and there's a lot of them, that's cut that down to 3 years. So now you've cut his nesting success in half. So he's far less likely to be able to survive and for the population to survive, because once they're gone until someone else immigrates in. Next slide, please. And this is the sandpine cone. This is the enemy. Sandpine have serotinous cones. Anyone knows what that means? Excuse me, I gotta get my mouse. So somebody knows what serotinous cones mean. Well, anyway, serotinous cones, for those of you who don't know, are cones that are held closed by resin. And they open up when they're heated. It can be heated by the sun sometimes, but typically, and in most cases, because of wildfire or prescribed fire. So sand pine doesn't care about its individual survival when it comes to fire. Longleaf pine do. Longleaf pine put a lot of resin into them. They have nice thick bark and they survive fire very well. And they laugh at it. Ha ha ha. They laugh at the fire. And fire goes through and the longleaf pine are fine, assuming that it's not too overgrown. But sand pine, if it even sees smoke in the distance, it dies. Okay, it's just like, okay, fire, I'm dead, it dies. But its strategy is not itself; it's willing to sacrifice itself for its kids. You know, like a good plant species does. And so the sand pines all died, but the Throttens cones open up because the heat from the fire opens up the cones. 2 days later, all these seeds finally fall in freshly mineralized soil, and the sand pine are now laughing at the longleaf pine because they're going to overwhelm. Okay, next slide, please. This is me, and as you can see, I broke the tractor. I did a good job of breaking it, but you can see how nicely chopped down this is. This is the chopper, the roller chopper, and these blades. Then you fill this with water to give it weight, and the blades chop up the stuff, makes it easier to burn, and puts it in better condition for the jigs overall when it's all done. And even though I look happy, I'm really not, because I do not like operating that dozer. I've got a bad neck, and this thing bumps and bangs, and my neck goes out every single time I'm operating. So, but I do it because I love the jigs. I'll sacrifice them totally. Here's a bigger chop of that here. This was in the Laco loop area that I was talking about. Okay, next slide, please. And this is the same spot as the previous photo. You saw this is 7 years later. See those sand pine? That's what I'm talking about. We want to get rid of those as best we can. We're going to be treating this area again in about 2 years. And we're going to put that down. We're going to burn it. Hopefully, if we get the sand pine cones on the ground, they will burn up in the fire rather than just opening up and reproducing. Next slide, please. This is a skid with roller chopper. This is from the 2015, 2016 treatment. And you see this big thing just goes right through the scrub. This is the one we contracted for. Okay, this is what we do. We say to the contractors that we send the bid out to, we say, please send out a bid for this. But before you send out your bid, we strongly recommend you come out to the forest and take a look at what you're bidding on. This guy didn't do that. He just wanted to outbid everyone else. So he bid his $64 an acre, won the bid, came out and saw what he was doing. And I have never heard someone cuss so much in my life. I mean, he was so mad. We're like, well, sorry, man, we told you to come out. You're supposed to look at it before you bid, and he didn't. But he fulfilled his obligation. He just didn't make the money he thought he was going to make because it took a lot longer to chop than he thought it would. Okay, next slide, please. Overgrown scrub on Laco loop berry. See how tall it is? See that there? This is my walking stick. It's about 4 feet tall. All right, so you can see how tall that scrub is. Okay, next slide, please. Overgrown scrub after chopping. This is at the exact same location. And it's all down. You can see the tall stuff in the background. So, next slide, please. And this is us doing the burning in Sulphur Island in 2014. That's driving through there. That's actually not a fire. That's the sun in the background. This is after the burn, smoking away. As you can see, it doesn't all burn up, but most of it does. And it stimulates the soil. So also the other things that come back, liatris come back like mad. I mean, they actually love it after you do this. We've got so many liatris in Seminole after we do treatments. Even if you do logging, you don't burn it, just go out there and log and stuff like the liatris everywhere. Okay, next slide, please. This is the Sulphur Island burn, post-burn with the Laco burning in the background. So this is Sulphur Island after the burn, and the next 3 days later, they decide to burn Sulphur Island. There's the column of smoke back there. Next slide, please. And this is Mike Martin, my coworker. We're doing mop-up after a wildfire. Now Mike is worked for 42 years for Forest Service. He's going to retire this year. His knees are shot. He's not going to retire until he gets his knees replaced because the benefits from insurance are better to get his knees replaced before he has to go on Medicare. So he's going to get his knees replaced on the 28th of December, and then he's retired. I am going to miss him. He's a great guy. Okay, next slide, please. This is a recent burn. Can be starkly beautiful. I mean, the beautiful. It's just so pretty here. I mean, people go, oh, it's ugly. I'm like, no, it's not. This is beautiful. Look at the contrast that goes through the ash and the oak, you can see the pattern of spiral as the oak grows in a spiral as it grows up there. It's just really pretty. Okay, next slide, please. Dinosaur habitat, 65 million years ago, just after the asteroid strike. Okay, I'm lying. It's not. I wasn't there then. I can't attest to that. But you can see it does kind of look like an asteroid strike with everything burned up. But that's what you want. You want it like this. You want it much burned up as possible so that it's harder for the oaks to come back. They will come back, but they'll grow slower. There'll be better habitat for scrub jays if they grow slower and more spaced out. And I don't mean spaced out as I am. I mean spaced out as they are. Okay. Next slide, please. One reason why we chop is so heavy fuels burn more thoroughly. So each one of these is a chop line. Remember that chopper I showed you? Those blades cut here and here and here. And that's where the fire takes would burn. So this piece of oak or sand pine burn more cleanly because of that. Next slide, please. Sulphur Island burn November 2014. As you can see, it doesn't all burn. You get patches that don't burn so well. That's fine. It's not a problem. Sometimes when you have this, it's called a mosaic burn. You have patches that don't burn. It means the scrub jays can move in there sooner because they can get acorns sooner. So you can have the area occupied and they can have a longer time for nesting success. Yes, Jackie?
How long after roller chopping do you burn?
Usually we want to do it within about 6 weeks, but sometimes it'll be as much as a year. The problem is we just don't have the resources to be able to do it right when we want it, and the weather does not always cooperate. But typically you want to get it done within 6 weeks. 6 months is more typical for us, but that's okay. If we do it in the autumn and we burn before the end of winter, the sand pine aren't going to regenerate on them. They get into the next part. Okay, next slide, please. Roughly the same spot as the previous photo in November 2018. So you see how quickly it grows back. This is off Sulphur Island, almost the exact same spot. And there's my 4-foot tall ski pole again. Next slide, please. And this is a translocation cage. We don't use those anymore, but this one worked quite well. The jays were fine in it. Next slide, please. Installation complete. Notice the electric fence around it to keep the bears out. They weren't anticipating this when they were doing the translocation. I said, guys, you need to do this. Why? Because the bears will go in there and they'll push the cage over to try and eat the jays inside. Do you want that to happen? Oh, no. So they're like, well, do you know anyone who can give us an electric fence, or we're going to have to buy it? I don't know. Let me think about it. So about 2 days later, I was driving out of the forest, and driving into the forest was the guy who has the apiary lease on the forest. So he has beehives on the forest. And as he's come in, I told him, I said, hey man, I know you have electric fencing around your hives. Could you hook us up to where we could buy some of this stuff? Because we have this project where we're doing translocating. We don't want birds to get eaten by the bears or injured by the bears. So just, can you give me some phone numbers and idea of prices and everything? He says, oh, I'll just give you the stuff to you. And so he did. He gave us all of the wire, all the batteries, all of the posts, and we gave them back to him when we were done. But he's like, yeah, don't worry about it. You don't have to do it right away. I got plenty. Just like that. A really great guy. It's amazing the relationship you can form with people. All right, next slide, please. And here we are. They're releasing the birds into the cage. The cage is called soft release. When they have, they also call it delayed release now. When you put them in a cage for a couple days. Turns out it doesn't help. Direct release, which is also called hard release, just bring them out there and letting them go works just as well. In fact, it works better. You don't have to spend as much time, and the birds are less stressed. Okay, next slide, please. Well, this was unexpected. I'm not quite sure what to do, and they're like, what's going on here? All right, next slide, please. And this, they were putting transceiver on them so we could track where they went, which was, they got some pretty good data on that, where these birds are going. So this is the transceiver on the back of the bird. And these eventually, they recatch the birds when the battery dies, take them off. And if they can't recatch the bird, it eventually falls off. We have one bird before still who had one, and it eventually fell off. He's fine. Next slide, please. Lake Tracy East. About 300 acres of former scrub previously converted to pasture with the oaks and other scrub endemic plants, roots not removed. Remember earlier when I said that in 1992, Archbold Biological Station did a study to find out how many scrub jays were left in Florida? Remember that? All right. Well, one of the guys doing this is a fellow named Bill Pranty. Bill Prandy was big in the birding world in Florida, still is, back then, but he was working for Archbold. So he went up to this area off of State Route 42 and he found scrub jays everywhere. And so he went, I saw his report, he says, we have to acquire this property. It's really important. This is a great property. There's scrub jays everywhere because there's been a wildfire. Well, Bill Prandy has a very big mouth and he tells everybody everything all the time. And he doesn't think about the consequences of it. And so this is what he did, is there was a guy driving down the road and the guy said, what you doing, feller? This guy's name was Moody L. Moody L owned the property. And Bill Prandy said, there's Florida scrub jay here. There's a threatened species. They're all over the place. This area has to be protected. We can't let anything happen to it. So Moody L's, being a good old boy in the country, says, wow, I don't want an endangered species on my property. Must be a disaster. I'll never be able to sell it. The state won't let me do anything with it. I better log it. So he goes out there and he logs out all the sand pine that's on it. And he chops down all the oaks. And he prepares to he puts some bahia grass out there, plants bahia grass, and puts cattle on it. But he doesn't root rake the oaks out. The oak roots are still there, so they start coming back. Well, suddenly it's now really good habitat for Florida scrub jays. So Bill Prandy's big mouth accidentally convinced this guy to do something to try to prevent scrub jays from being there, which he didn't understand scrub jay biology enough. So the scrub jays came back because he did this thing. And then he was worried he wasn't going to be able to sell the property. Well, because there were scrub jays on it all over the place, the state really wanted it. So the state bought it from him. So he made the money anyway. This world is so weird. I tell you, it's so complicated. All right. Anyway, recovering back in the scrub with good spacing, but getting too tall, lots of jays, 44 birds and 10 terrace off October 2007. The birds began dwindling in 2010. Oaks are back, being too tall. So oak reduction was initiated where they went in. There was a company called, it was not a consulting firm, a nonprofit called Wildland Restorations International. And they first, Nature Conservancy did it, but then Wildland Restoration International took over and they came out there for free, cut down all the oaks right where I wanted. I told them to cut them down between need level and waist level because I wanted the oaks to come back quicker and produce acorns quicker so the jays could move in quicker. And it worked. They moved in within 1 year in one area because they came back so quickly and produced acorns. The jays, it was fantastic. I was so happy. Anyway, birds began dwindling in 2011. Did the oak reduction average of 35 acres per year has been treated from 2000 onward until 2019 when WRI went belly up, which is right in the middle of the treatments. I was very disappointed. Average 2-year post-treatment still reoccupied by forest scrub jay. Next slide, please. Barragona parcel of 100 acres immediately to the south and adjacent, purchased in 2012. It already had been logged with sand pine overstory in 2007, had been optimal for Florida scrub jays. This is another one of these crazy coincidences. The guy who owned it, his name was Gard, G-A-A-R-D. And he went to my boss, Joe Bishop, in 2006 and said, you know, I hear tell that you can make some money if you have gopher tortoises moved to your property for mitigation purposes. And my boss, Joe Bishop, says, well, that's true, he says, but your property of 100 acres is way too overgrown for gopher tortoises. You're going to have to log it first. And the guy says, oh, okay, I'll do that. I'll make some money out of it. So he logged it, made his money. Didn't go anywhere. The gopher tortoise things worked really well for the scrub jays. So then the scrub jays moved into this property. And so we had scrub jays living on the guard property. Well, he owed some other guy named Barragona some money, but he didn't have the money. So he gave him this property in lieu of that money. But this was back around 2009, 2010, right in the middle of the big recession. And so the property prices had dropped. But Mr. Barragona wanted to get rid of it really quickly. Well, I was up there showing the other part of the property because remember this grant I was trying to get, that I did get? Well, I was taking Todd Mecklenburg of the National Fish and Wildlife Service, who's the guy who's going to be giving me the grant. So we're driving along on this L's property where the guy, Moody L's, cleared it because he didn't want scrub jays, so he wanted to sell it. Scrub jays moved in. So I'm driving along here with Todd Mecklenburg. who's an old hippie, and he's just the coolest guy. He's like, oh, Ralph, this is so cool. I really like that. It's awesome, you know? And we're driving along, and our property, the elephant property, is to the right. To the left is the Barragona property. And as we're driving along, a black bear comes running out from right to left, goes over the fence onto the Barragona property. And Todd he had never seen a black bear in one. Oh, this is awesome. Oh my God, this is so effing great, man. This is fantastic. Oh, wow. I said, it's an omen. He says, what do you mean? I said, well, this is important property for us. He says, well, you know, for the grant, I'm going to have to transfer probably about $600,000 out of the property acquisition. We have 1.6 million in property acquisition. We're going to transfer about 600,000 of it out into treatment. And I said, so that means you have 1 million left in the property acquisition fund? He says, yeah. I said, well, there you go. Just buy this property for us. I took him out there. There was a scrub jay on there. That was a hand-tamed bird. And as soon as Todd gets out of the truck, comes and lands on his head. So he's like, oh man, you guys have to get this property. So long story short, we got the property because of a bear and a scrub jay and people who try to do something for one reason and something else happens. 5 minutes? Are you sure?
7 minutes.
I'll talk quicker. There's our been by the time Burton's Health Forestry is most shifting south from Lake Tracy East, which is the L tract. Occupation again, in 2014 is a sandplant generation overtopped the oaks because there's a lot left. 50 acres were chopped and burned in 2015. Now holds 3 territories. The other 50 acres we just chopped this year, and we're going to burn it later this year. So we've still got 5 territories in there this year. Okay, next slide, please. June 2014, 19 birds, 9 territories. 2015, 19 birds and 8 territories. June 2016, 19 birds and 8 territories. 2017, 20 birds and 8 territories, 19 birds, 8 territories. So you see the pattern here? We keep treating. We treat 35 or so acres on average every year. And as long as we keep doing this nonstop, we end up with a stable population. And now that we've acquired more property to the south that's been treated, the Barragona, and then we treated another bunch down that, then those areas will grow in population. We'll double the population, and if we keep treating it, the population will stay stable. Assuming reproductive success, which climate change might throw a wrench right in those years. Okay, next slide, please. This is the old pasture. What worked prior to hardwood reduction activities. Problem, blue jays like it all. So blue jays move in when it gets over 6 meters tall because blue jays like forests. And they think of towns as forests because we have tall trees in them. And they think, is this a forest? When the blue jays move in, what do blue jays like to do? They like to depredate other birds' nests. They're really good at it. Pretty much, actually, every bird will do it if they can, but blue jays are particularly good at it. And so they were depredating all the scrub jay nests. When the blue jays population grew, the scrub jay population plummeted because they couldn't reproduce successfully. Anyway, again, 4 foot tall thing there. Me when I first started getting my pot belly. There's the 4 foot tall walking stick. Next slide, please. And this is it after it's cut down. Scrub jays like it like that. So you can see it's all been cut down. Next slide, please. And there it is coming back 2 years later. 2 years later, and scrub jays moved in right away. Next slide, please. There he is, little Juby scrub jays. Uh-oh, my laser was on. Little Juby scrub jays just sitting there staring at me. And this was the 2 years after that. 2 years after we did the treatment, first year they had reproductive success right away. Next slide, please. And there's the blue jays that are beautiful birds, but pain in the neck when you're in the scrub. Next slide, please. And there's a nest there in Lake Tracy, 2012-2013 reduction area. She would lay 2 more eggs before she started incubating. They lay 1 egg per day for 4 days, and then they started incubating them all at once. Next slide, please. And there she is sitting on. She was a close sitter, so she would not leave the nest. That's that bird I showed at the beginning who was sitting on my arm. She's like, oh, I'm not leaving. By the way, do you have any peanuts? If you offer them a peanut while they're sitting there on the nest, they're like, oh, okay. They forget the nest, they just want the peanut. Okay, next slide, please. And there's her kids. Aren't they cute? I know. You can hear them snoring. Okay, next slide, please. There is 13 days post-hatching and 5 days before fledging. Next slide, please. And there it is after fledge. You see they look dumb and goofy like all them kids do. But they're out of the nest, so they're a lot safer now because when they're dispersed, it's harder for predators to get them. Next slide, please. And this is one that I've banded. The band, again, I showed you how I do it. This bird is silver, white, dash, blue, red. And this pattern indicates that this bird is of unknown provenance. I don't know where she came from. Next slide, please. So the overall result, the removal of sandpine quarter, the sandpine otherwise healthy scrub will reduce hawk predation on adult birds, reduce blue jay predation. Oak reduction reduces or eliminates blue jay predation on Florida scripted nests, like Tracy East, and logging bird chopping on large tracts, megajoin growth has and will continue to spur growth of Florida scripted numbers. Next slide, please. Results we want: healthy, low scrub with proper plant spacing. Next slide, please. And this is Silica. She's up on top of our ladder that goes to our attic. She's walking down. Wow, fascinating. Now look at me. Look at me. Next slide, please. She's again Silica to get down here. No, I will not. Too cute. You can't make it. And she's right. I can't reach her. She's too tall. Okay, next slide, please. Bye-bye. That's it.
Time for a few questions. So if anyone in the audience or if there's any questions on Zoom, Lori's going to read them out for us.
Yes, in the back there.
How often do you translocate birds between managed areas?
This has only been done on Seminole State Forest from 2017 until last year. They are doing it on other managed areas from Ocala down to Rock Springs Run. That program is continuing, but it has ended on Seminole State Forest. Yes.
About how large is each of those territories?
The average size of a Florida scrub jay territory is 17.5 acres, according to the literature. However, ours tend to be larger. They tend to be 20 to 25 acres. We don't know why. It might be because of quality of habitat. It might be because of the density of the birds. It might just take up as much. We know this, that if you have one scrub jay territory, you have 150 acres of scrub, they'll claim it all. Excuse me. They'll claim it all, which is crazy. They can't defend it, but there's no one to defend it against. But we don't know exactly why, but typically on Seminole State Forest, 20 to 25 acres. Yes. Yes. Yeah, you.
You talked about a lot of different treatment methods. Is your preferred treatment then chopping and then burning? Do you ever just chop? Do you ever burn?
This is a good question. We have chopping. We also have a more work method that works just as good as chopping, in my opinion. And I've seen it work a lot, is where we just walk the scrub down. We don't have a chopper, we just have a dozer, and it just walks over it. If it's low scrub that isn't overgrown, it's just, well, not super overgrown, it's not like 30 years overgrown, just, 10, 12, 13, 15-year-old scrub, it works just as well. And you don't have to bring a chopper out there. It's much easier to do. And you have less ground disturbance too. But the problem is scrub only burns in extreme conditions naturally. So again, red flag days. Well, the rangers aren't going to go out and do prescribed birds on red flag days because that's right in the middle of firefighting season. They're all out doing firefighting anyway, and it's too dangerous. But if you chop it first, you can burn it on days where it's not red flag. So if we want to get the burning done and guarantee to get it done safely, we have to do some other kind of pre-treatment, either chopping it or walking it down before we burn it. So that's what we focus on doing. Any other questions? Yes.
Within a territory, the birds within that territory, or a family, whatever you
Yes.
call them.
Yes.
What's the average number?
The average number is 3 adult birds. That means a male, a female, and 1 helper. Helpers are almost always male. They're very rarely female, though sometimes they are. The females almost always disperse in their year after their birth, after their first school year, in the spring of the next year after they're born, and the rest in the autumn after that. So within a year and a half, almost all the females are dispersed. 2/3 of the males will disperse, but the other ones are the ones that are probably a little bit more wimpy, a little bit more chicken, or not quite so smart, or a little bit weaker, will stay behind as helpers. but you can have as many as 6 helpers in the territory, though that's pretty unusual. But one is more likely. And sometimes they'll adopt helpers in. For example, if you have a young female territory, first-year bird, she hasn't made it through her first year yet, and there's a bachelor male nearby, he might come over to that territory and say, listen, if you let me be a helper with you guys through the winter, I will sit here and do sentinel duty for you and be a help that way. Just so long as in the spring you give me your daughter. And they're like, oh, that's a good deal. Because she's going to leave anyway. Now she has a ready-made mate. They move off, they build the territory next door. She has kids, so they've passed on their genes more with greater likelihood of passing on their genes because she already has a mate waiting for her. And he helps them with sentinel duty in the middle of winter. So sometimes that happens. So they'll get males that are not related to the birds in the territory who become helpers under circumstances like that. And sometimes it's just because they knew each other when they were younger. Because juvenile scrub jays from one territory and the next territory, they'll hang out together and they'll do stuff together and they become friends and they find, hierarchies. And so sometimes you'll find a male who has a territory and his old bud from when a kid comes over and says, man, I don't have a territory right now. Can I sleep on the sofa for a couple of weeks? And you're like, yeah, sure, why not? And the female's like, whoa, why are you doing this? Why didn't you ask me? I'm sorry, I couldn't turn him down. He's my old friend. And the next thing you know, he's there for 3 years as a helper. Okay, I'm serious. This is exactly like that. Yes.
If you're out hiking and you see a scrub jay with no tags, is there a place that you can kind of report that?
With no bands?
Yeah, I'm sorry. No bands.
Well, not really.
No.
If I mean, you could report to FWC, but it won't make any difference. They're not going to send anyone out to look. They're going to say, "Oh, great, you saw a scrub jay, wonderful. Bye bye." So just if you see one with bands, that's a different story. If you can get the color band combination, so you read it, right leg first, left leg second, with a dash in between. So let's say it was silver, red, green, dash blue. That's what you'd want to say. You say it was silver and red and green. Sometimes you can't tell the colors, not so good. But the important thing is what color is the band on the upper left leg, upper band on the left leg. That's important because that will tell you where that bird came from. So if you see any bird, any scrub jay with blue, you call me. And you call me directly. Okay, did anyone on Zoom wanna?
No questions?
No? Yes, Pete.
How many scrub jays are on the nearby hunter property?
Oh, that's a good question. Last I checked, there were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, I think 8. That's from last July. I don't know how many there are there now, but there's 8. And we had on their territory immediately to their west on Fox Pen, which is our property, we have about 140 acres of scrub that year. We had 8 territories on there with an average of 3 birds each. Okay, so 3 times 8 is 24. All right. Well, then this spring, they just almost all disappeared. So something happened. The adults were disappearing, the kids were disappearing. We found 3 of the kids later on, they dispersed, they formed territory someplace else. And a lot of them were birds that I abandoned that year because they had great nesting success, but most of the adults just disappeared. So it was either an epidemic or they were eating something bad, we don't know. Maybe there was some local idiot who was out there shooting them. I don't know, there's no way we can know. But now we've only got 1, 2, 3 territories out there now. You had a question too?
You probably answered, but I just wondered, are you happy with the success that you're having, or should
I am moderately happy with the success because we have at least maintained a fairly stable population. I'm not happy that it's so bloody hard to get enough treatments done so that we can grow the population. Because with the decreasing nesting success, that means we have to have more habitat available, or we're not going to be able to maintain the birds long term. So, and it's very hard. Some organizations are really good at getting prescribed fire done, getting treatments done, not the Florida Forest Service. I have to beg, borrow, and steal. And even when they're helpful and they want to be helpful, which we finally have a senior ranger who really wants to help. He really does. And he actually comes to me and asks me if he can help. I'm like, wow, this has never happened before in my 15 years here. It's still really hard to get the resources together at the right time and the right place to get it done. Hopefully that's changing now that he's a senior ranger, and I'm thinking maybe it will be, but it all depends on getting those dozers out there to walk the stuff down so that it's all ready to burn when they have the opportunity. Yes.
Do you have people at other Seminole County parks looking for these birds? or only at your location?
I'm at Seminole State Forest, which is in Lake County, but I'm the only guy there who does this. There are other entities like the Livonia Preserve in Volusia County that have plenty of scrub jays, and at Blue Springs, and they have biologists there who keeps track of them there. And most of the state-owned or federally owned properties or county-owned properties, the government-owned properties, have someone who keeps track of scrub jays if they have scrub jays and habitat on there, but not necessarily consistently, not all the time. And sometimes they just don't have the personnel to do it. So it means private people have to go out there and do it. Anyone else? Are you sure? Are you absolutely positive no more questions? Was anyone going to ask me what it's going to be like on the 13th when we go out for the hike? Because
What's
I'll
it
tell
gonna
you
be
if
like?
you ask, but if you don't ask, there's no point in my telling you.
What's it gonna be like?
It's going to be wonderful.
It's gonna be beautiful.
It's going to be good. Have a great day. There's a surprise. I'm not telling you what the surprise is, but there's going to be a surprise if anyone comes out there, and you're going to love the surprise. Okay?
And kind of question over here.
Yes. Well, yes. Do I think scrub jays will ever be the state bird? That's a really good question. And I'm really hopeful that this time they will, but there's a lot of people who don't want to be the state bird because they have other interests. But if people like you call into your representative and say, I think it's important that the scrub jay become a state bird, maybe they'll listen to you. Okay? Because that's the way government works. It has to listen to the people eventually. You are one of the people, so you get to tell them what you think. Okay?
Thank you so much for that.
Thank you, folks. I'm going to play back here on my bed set up.